I know one personality that can add some fresh information on how to make this relationship much more effective. And you will be surprised right now because I want to invite a third person to our conversation. It's artificial intelligence. It's called ChatGPT. I don't know if you use it, but we are using it. And that's why we asked him how to improve the relations between Ukraine and Global South. And this is what he answered us. So I'm just quoting, improving relations with the Global South in a multi-faceted task for any country, including Ukraine. Here are some strategic that Ukraine can consider to enhance its relations with the Global South. And I will stress his advices towards cultural diplomacy. So here's the quote from GPT chat. You have to promoting a cultural diplomacy that can foster greater understanding and appreciation between Ukraine and the Global South. Ukraine can organize cultural festivals, art exhibitions, film screenings, and other cultural events to showcase its heritage and traditions. Similarly, Ukraine can actively participate in cultural events organized by countries in the Global South. There are much more proposals in economic cooperation, development assistance, and strengthening political ties, public diplomacy, and so on. There are lots of different points that was stressed by GPT chat. But I want to ask in this cultural aspect, how important is this, especially for now, because we understand that Russian propaganda affects the mind of societies of these countries too, and very, very effectively. So this what GPT chat advised us, is it really helpful? And how much time will it take to implement all these propositions? How do you think?
I don't usually agree with Chat GPT because
me either, but it's still interesting to hear you.
you need to know the subject matter to be able to weed out the accurate answers from the inaccurate or the mixed answers. So a paragraph is accurate, a paragraph is not. But in that case, I 100% agree. In that answer, I think it is very, very important to keep on debunking myth on one end, because I can tell you the amount of myth I have debunked in the Middle East, in universities, in think tanks, in invitations with officials, and so on and so forth. People were thinking that basically this is a war between the Ukrainian speakers and Russian speakers in Ukraine. So the divide was a language, and I had to tell them, the overwhelming majority of volunteer brigades and volunteer battalions and leaders of the Ministry of Interior are Russian speakers. They can speak Russian, but they're fighting for the independence of their country. And I was giving a similar example with Algeria. The leaders of Algeria's war of independence were all French speakers. They all speak French fluently, better than Arabic maybe. And they identified themselves as Algerians. They did not want anything to do with France, and they fought against French colonialism. So I was trying to make some relations with that, and on so many issues they thought it's a West-East divide. And I was telling them, I interviewed people from the Azov battalion. All of 100% of them were like, choose your town between Mariupol and Kharkiv. Choose your town, and you'll find somebody from there. I found one from Khmelnytsky, one guy. So the overwhelming majority were from the east, were people affected by the Russian aggression in the east, and they were fighting against. So you need to try to debunk some of the myth that is going on there. And then people thought that Crimea was always, like, since the Crimean War, they were thinking Crimea was always a part of Russia, So you need to debunk that as well and tell them, Russia signed at least 4 times in December 1991, 3 times, once in Brest-Minsk and once in Almaty and once in Minsk again in this 8th of December and 2 other times in December 91 on the territorial integrity of these republics. And then again in 1994 in Budapest agreement to give security assurance for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And they signed this with the UK, with the US, the Russian Federation, and then two other observers were China and France. So basically, the Security Council was giving these assurances to Ukraine in exchange of handing it the nuclear weapons to keep Crimea and keep the rest of its territory. So just people need to be reminded of this, because either they don't know, they're not following. So it's very important to keep these discussions going on via cultural events, via academic events, via think tank exchanges, university exchanges, films and documentaries, as you mentioned. And I have really to thank many of the Ukrainian colleagues, researchers, academics, artists who were very active in the Ukrainian civil society, basically, who were very active in on some of the media fronts, on some of the academic events, and some of the cultural events that were going on in the region. And they kept on persistent. No, we're coming. You know, so they were persistent, and they were very, very good in terms of debunking some of this myth and countering some of the very misleading propaganda.
I still have a lot of strategical questions to you, but I think that we will not have much time to discuss all the topics that might help to stop earning money for war. It's talking about the trade of oil, but I better leave it for the next hour program. But at the end of our conversation, I still would want to ask you the question about the future. When Ukraine wins, how mainly it can affect on the political, on the economical, on the diplomatic, and on the influential parts, as we discussed already, in this region, in your region, mainly?
I think when Ukraine wins, and she will win, we will have to. I think it can easily become a model for one, defense and security, because I think it will have the most experienced and the most combat effective armed forces, perhaps in East Europe, and many will take a lot of lessons from her. That's one, and then also a model in terms of defying aggression of a much stronger side over years, and resisting that side, succeeding in getting back its lands, and then rebuilding its country in terms of reconstruction. Reconstruction will need a lot of help, and this is why you have to form friendships and alliances. And also it will be a model in terms of how this war was ran, because it was a people's war by all means, from the top to the bottom, from the president who refused to leave the country and leave its capital, despite all the offers and the advices that were given to him by his allies and friends, to the babushkas who were giving the positions of the Russian armored columns to the artillery. So it was a people's war on all levels. And then also the one of the lessons is basically that there will be reforms that were happening in terms of the security, defense, but also in terms of the anti-corruption, in terms of the judiciary, in terms of the management institutions and the political institutions. They were happening between 2014 and until victory, and many of those will give a lot of experience to countries that want to also reform their institutions and their governance sectors of all kinds, from economic to military to security to financial to political and so on. So I think Ukraine. I think it will. Once victory happens, it will become hopefully a model to learn from and to pursue, and it will be an exchange as well from other countries as well who've been through similar experiences.